Honourable members, the prayer. Lord, the God of righteousness and truth, grant to our King, to his government, to members of the Legislative Assembly, and to all in positions of responsibility, the guidance of your Spirit. May they never lead the province wrongly through love of power, desire to please, or unworthy ideas, but laying aside all private interest and prejudice, keep in mind their responsibility to seek to improve the condition of all. Amen. Honourable members, it being the last sitting day of the week, we will now be led in the singing of God Save the King by Nicole Williams.
God save our gracious King, long live our noble King. God save the King, send him victorious, happy and glorious, long to reign over us. God save the King.
Please be seated.
Introduction of visitors. Introduction of guests.
The Honourable Member for Lac St. Anne Parkland has a school group to introduce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to introduce to you and through you the amazing kids from my constituency, Lac St. Anne Parkland, better known as God's Country, the Grasmere K-7 School. Please rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly, and these kids are truly strong and free, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable the Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to introduce to you and through you to all members of the Assembly a great group of grade sixers from the Charlotte Small Elementary School, one of the beautiful new elementary schools built in Clearwater County. I ask them all to rise and receive the traditional warm welcome of this Assembly.
The Honourable Member for Sherwood Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To you and through you to all the members of the Assembly, I wish to introduce you to the wonderful students from Woodbridge Farms Elementary School in Sherwood Park. Please rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
The Honourable Member for Airdrie East.
Mr. Speaker, it's my honour to introduce to you and through to all the members of the Assembly some guests in the gallery, Mr. Sandeep Singh Delwin and Jaspreet Segu. Sandeep runs a nonprofit in Edmonton, the Edmonton Welfare Association, an organization that does a number of volunteer initiatives from cleaning parks to providing free meals. And Jaspreet Segu is an accomplished business owner in the Edmonton area. Please rise and receive the traditional warm welcome of this.
The Honourable Member for Lesser Slave Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to rise today and introduce to you and through you a good friend of mine, John Warren from Royal Camp Services. John's company, Royal Camp Services, has several agreements with some Indigenous communities in my region, and I'm proud to have him here and very excited to introduce him to our newest Parliamentary Secretary from Livingston McLeod. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Beverly Clairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to introduce to you and through you and to the Assembly two guests who are here today from our constituency office. Karina Lowe, who is a social work student with us, and Raina Haythorne, constituency assistant extraordinaire. So if they could please both stand up and rise and receive the traditional warm welcome of this House.
The Honourable Member for Fort Saskatchewan Vegreville.
Speaker, I'd like to introduce to you and through you to all the members of the Assembly my guest Lev Rennell. When Lev is not working as a mechanic, he volunteers his time assisting with settlement of Ukrainian evacuees and new immigrants to Alberta communities. Please rise, Lev, and receive the warm traditional welcome of the Assembly.
Now, the Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to rise today and introduce to you and through you and to all members of the Assembly 20 young farmers from across the province participating in the Alberta Canola Leaders event here in Edmonton. I had the pleasure of meeting with these leadership candidates at their banquet last night, and Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that the future of agriculture is in great hands. I'd ask that they all please rise and receive the warm welcome of this Assembly.
Pardon me. The Honourable Member for Calgary Falconridge. Does the Honourable Member for Lac St. Anne Parkland have another introduction, or just the school group today?
I could try.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Are there others? Seeing none, the clerk.
Ministerial statements. Member statements.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton City Centre has a statement to make.
Mr. Speaker, last week when Blair Caniff arrived at what he expected to be a care home in Leduc, he might have had a little song running through his head. Well, since I left the Royal, Alex, I found a new place to dwell. Just a little cruise down Highway 2 with the Travel Lodge Motel. Got no support there, can't fit my wheelchair, but the UCP says it's all right. Motel medicine, Mr. Speaker. For those of us with suspicious minds, there's a lot of questions to be asked. I have to say, lately, it's always been on my mind. The Ministers of Health and of Community Social Services both insist they didn't sign a contract with this shady social service agency. Well then, Mr. Speaker, who did? We know these folks weren't fleecing for free. So how did they get on a list of providers at a hospital? How long have they been on it? How many other contracts like this exist? How many others have been housed in hotels? The ministers refuse to say. They don't want to answer the question. It seems they're all shook up. And well, they should be. After all, it was only 2 years ago that the Premier was musing about housing seniors needing long-term care in hotels. It was only in November that she announced refocusing of the healthcare system that aims to sell off public long-term and continuing care facilities and engage in a massive expansion of new private contracts in every corner of the system, and we know how that's going to go. Just look at this government's massive failure with privatization of lab services under Dynalife. A plan 3 years in the making that failed in less than one, leaving Albertans on the hook for $96 million. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to improving health care, the UCP ain't never caught a rabbit. Any claim that they're high class, well, that is just a lie. Under the UCP, it's been a race to the bottom, with Albertans left waiting for care in parking lots, hallways, and motels. A whole lot of conversation, little real action to end the chaos that they've created. It's time we mark their plan and this government return to sender.
The honourable member for Lesser Slave Lake used to reside right in that place and had the propendency to singing as well. It was out of order when he did it, just as it was today. However, I do appreciate a good member statements with some level of cleverty. It was still out of order. The honourable member for Fort McMurray Wood, Buffalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today marks the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, a day where Albertans and people from around the world unite against racism. Each year on March 21st, we observe the anniversary of a tragic event in South Africa, the Sharpeville Massacre, where police fatally shot 69 individuals during a peaceful protest against apartheid. Today is an opportunity to address the specific challenges still faced by many people in Alberta and to explore ways to promote racial equity, inclusion, and greater cultural awareness. Alberta's government categorically condemns all forms of race-based hate, discrimination, and prejudice, and will recommit its pledge to continue to work on making Alberta a safer, more welcoming place for all. Input and recommendations from the Alberta Anti-Racism Advisory Council, the Premier's Council on Multiculturalism, and the newly inaugurated Alberta Black Advisory Council have played a critical role in shaping the province's anti-racism policy. Through initiatives like the Anti-Racism Grant, we are supporting grassroots efforts while implementing recommendations from the Alberta Anti-Racism Action Plan, where 26 actions have already been completed across 25 ministries. We created the Alberta Security Infrastructure Program grant, which funds security assessments, training, equipment, immediate response, and security infrastructure improvements to facilities serving communities or identifiable groups at risk of hate or bias-motivated crimes or incidents. While we have made great strides in combating racism, we understand there's still more to do to ensure that marginalized people feel safe. So today, on the International Day of the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, let us recommit to fighting racism, discrimination, and hatred in all of its forms, and to build strong, welcoming, and inclusive communities. In Alberta, we have no tolerance for racial discrimination. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Edmonton Ellerslie has a statement.
Mr. Speaker, the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination serves as a vital reminder of the ongoing struggle against systemic racism, prejudice, and the remnants of Eurocentric colonization on Indigenous people worldwide. By dedicating a day to raise awareness and promote dialogue about racial discrimination, societies can come together to acknowledge the deep-seated inequalities that persist in our lives and in our communities, and work towards meaningful change. This day provides an opportunity for individuals and communities to reflect on their own biases, challenge discriminatory attitudes, and advocate for inclusive policies that foster equality, equity, and diversity. Historically, we as Indigenous and racialized people were taught that our ways had no value, and in some cases, a cultural genocide ensued. But to every Indigenous and racialized child, I say, you are priceless. You and your culture cannot be silenced. Be proud of your people and their history. This day underscores the importance of solidarity and collective action in combating racism and working for change. It highlights the interconnectedness of different communities and the shared responsibility to stand against discrimination in all its forms, as many diverse cultures and people, but as one against the historical injustices of our past. Through education, activism, and policy reform, this day inspires individuals and institutions to take concrete steps towards building a more just and equitable world where every person, regardless of ethnicity or culture, can thrive and contribute to society without fear of prejudice or discrimination. Let's all continue to do our part and strengthen our communities together.
The honourable member for Lac St. Anne Parkland has a statement to make.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This United Conservative government is doing more than any other government before to support the homeless, improve public safety, and make sure that the most vulnerable in our society get access to the services they need to live successful, happy lives. Fortunately, the NDP opposition has made it very clear that they don't feel the same way. Instead of getting vulnerable Albertans the help they need, the NDP opposition, or should I say the party of tents, would rather have people brutalized by dangerous gangs, made victims of the environment, where lethal drugs run rampant, worse yet, freeze and burn to death in encampments. Just look at their socialist comrades in British Columbia. They flooded the streets with taxpayer-funded drugs, emboldened cartels and organized crime, defunded the police, and demoralized their hard-working citizens. This is the legacy of the NDP, and they have it their way. If they had it their way, this would be the future for Albertans. But, Mr. Speaker, United Conservative Government is standing firm against the normalized chaos that the NDP so desperately want. Jasper Ave will not become East Hastings. Let's be clear, Mr. Speaker. This is a direct attack on the well-being of the most vulnerable in our society. It's a sick socialist ideology would rather see traffic in minors, exploding propane heaters, total victimization by dangerous gangs, unsanitary conditions, including over 4,000 unused needles to keep people safe and warm in the winter. The opposition strategy to attack the incredible social service organizations that work day in and day out to support those in need. It's an attack to our Indigenous partners who are working tirelessly to provide shelter, cultural services as well. It's an attack on our law enforcement officers who risk their lives every day to keep Albertans safe. And most of all, it's an attack on the dignity of Albertans, who the NDP would rather have in an abandoned tent and a photo op than to really take care of. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we will not be distracted by their dangerous socialist ideology that put lives at risk. Our nation and support center, our navigation support center is helping hundreds of people access life-changing service. The center is connected to hundreds of people with their ID services, financial benefits, medical help, recovery supports, shelter, and housing. It's a compassionate approach that's making amazing progress in changing the way of our communities and our lives. We're not the party of tents. We're going to do the right thing, not just for a photo op.
Order. Order. The honourable member for Edmonton Meadows.
Mr. Speaker, the Premier announced today she is sending more help to try to bail out the Minister of Health. But Albertans need her to do a lot more than that. Even though the minister can't seem to get a single shovel in the ground to build a hospital, she sure has dug herself quite the hole. The South Edmonton Hospital they campaigned on is just one example. They scrapped that. And now the Premier wants people to drive to Red Deer instead. The UCP highway medicine scheme is a bad idea, so is putting more pressure on the hospital in Red Deer. The UCP's P3 means there's no guarantee the current hospital will be able to keep functioning for the people of Red Deer. Never mind people from Edmonton too. But it doesn't matter to this government if their schemes don't make sense, just as long as they can pass the buck. Look at this week's news. People are being discharged from the hospital and being shipped down the highway to motel medicine. Except in this UCP world, medicine means a bathroom you can't use and the same fast food from time to time. Mr. Speaker, Albertans deserve a government that is focused on making sure there are enough hospital beds and properly paid, rested, and respected healthcare workers to provide the care these patients need and deserve. The UCP has failed these Albertans, but this side of the House, we will never stop standing up for them. Thank you.
The honourable member for Edmonton Beverly Clareview has a statement to make.
Mr. Speaker, for many students, today is the second last day of school before spring break, so I thought it would be a good time as a teacher and as a member of a family with many teachers to rise and provide some clarity about what it is that teachers actually do. Teachers don't want to take over the role of parents. Instead, they want to collaborate with them and help parents understand what their kids are learning and how they are doing. That might look like a classroom tour, a weekly newsletter, a school zone announcement, daily email, parent information night, after-school meeting, or quick conversation over the fence. Teachers are professionals bound by Alberta's Education Act, Code of Conduct, Teaching Quality Standard, the curriculum, and by division and board policies and regulations. Teachers teach curriculum. They take learning outcomes and create and plan lessons for 20, 25, 30 or more students, often without enough resources. They think about how to reach everyone in an increasingly complex classroom. They attend PD sessions and classes so they can learn new things and apply that learning in their practice. They see the affordability crisis on a daily basis and make sure there's food available for kids and to support their schools' families. They create classrooms that are safe and welcoming. They partner with colleagues. They differentiate instruction, meet kids where they are, and guide them forward. They supervise before and after school, soothe hurt feelings, bring in rocking chairs and carpets with ABCs on them, read books out loud, and share stories about what it was like when they were kids. They have an endless supply of Band-Aids and know the miracle of a baggie filled with ice. They assess, provide feedback, spend time after everyone's gone, getting things set up for the next day, often taking a suitcase of student work home to review. They administer formal assessments that can take a half hour or more per student, try to mitigate gaps, and then have frank talks with parents. And when it's report card time, they communicate through one mark in a few words what's challenging, what's learned, and what will be next. That is what teachers do.
Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Presenting petitions, notices of motions, introduction of bills.
The Honourable the Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm honoured to rise today to request leave to introduce Bill 13, the Real Property Governance Act. If passed, this legislation will ensure that public buildings and lands are managed consistently and transparently across government to the benefit of all Albertans. It will also create a centralized inventory of government-owned land and buildings to help government resource its programs more strategically. I hereby move the Real Property Governance Act. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable the Minister of Infrastructure has moved first reading of Bill 13, Real Property Governance Act. All those in favour of the motion for first reading, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. In my opinion, the ayes have it. That motion is carried and so ordered.
Bill 13, Real Property Governance Act, is now read a first time. Tabling returns and reports.
Are there tablings? The Honourable Member for Edmonton, Highlands, Norwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to table the requisite number of copies of another comprehensive study that's entitled Actually Rent Control is Great, Revisiting Ontario's Experience and Supply of Housing and Security of Tenure. And I would urge all members to read all the tablings that I've tabled in this House.
The Honourable Member for Bonnyville, Cold Lake, St. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm tabling this copy of a petition that has been done by one of my local constituents. He's very passionate about Mini Lake Park Ground, and I look forward to seeing some movement on this.
Are there other tablings? The Honourable Member for Edmonton Decor.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to table an article from CBC, which was referenced yesterday's statement, the member from Edmonton Highlight Norwood. The title of the article is Homeless People in Edmonton are dying at 8 times the rate as pre-pandemic.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton McClung has a tabling.
Speaker, I rise to table 5 requisite copies of a notice of a screening of a documentary film called Stolen Time. It's a riveting feature of the private care, long-term care facilities neglecting their vulnerable charges as they rape huge profits.
Are there others? Good.
Tablings to the clerk. I wish to advise the Assembly that the following document was deposited with the Office of the Clerk. On behalf of Honourable Mr. Jones, Minister of Jobs, Economy and Trade, responses to questions raised during Ministry of Jobs, Economy and Trade 2024-25 main estimates consideration on March 18th, 2024.
Honourable members, the time is now 1:50, and that makes it oral question period. And the Honourable, the official opposition House Leader, has question 1.
Mr. Speaker, the UCP's latest scheme involves dependence on highway health care and motel medicine. In one case, Blair Caniff had a stroke, was partially paralyzed and discharged to a roadside motel with little to no access to care nor an accessible washroom. Then the Minister of Health accused him of lying about it. To the Premier, will she finally and unequivocally apologize to Mr. Caniff for what happened to him, including the unfounded accusations by her Health Minister?
The honourable point of order is noted at 1:51. The Honourable the Premier has risen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We made an announcement last week for a reason. As we were going through, looking at some of the bottlenecks that we have in our acute care system, one of the things that we became aware of was that there are 1,500 people at any given time who need an alternative level of care. It's the reason why we have to build out more mental health beds, more addiction treatment beds. We have to build out more homeless supports for convalescents, and we also have to build out more continuing care. This is exactly the reason why we have got a cross-ministry working group addressing this issue, because we have to make sure that those acute care beds are available for those with acute needs.
The official opposition House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, they are the government, they are the ministers and the Premier. They are responsible. Mr. Caniff was treated in a hospital. The Health Minister herself said that AHS staff, quote, followed their proper procedures, end quote. Global News has confirmed people are still getting medical care in a motel. So to the Health Minister, this is her file, will she table the discharge procedures that led to motel medicine? Will she tell us how many Albertans have been discharged this way and where are they now?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are 536 people a day discharged. Now, many of them are able to discharge back into their home under their own convalescence. There are many who are discharged in the care of families, and there are others who are discharged in the care of patients. There are a very small number of individuals with highly complex needs, with mental health, addiction, homelessness, and other issues that we have now got a cross-ministry working group identifying an appropriate place with an appropriate partner so that they can be treated the appropriate way.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Millwoods.
Mr. Speaker, Albertans want answers. They want hospitals built now, and they want the UCP to stop turning public health care into horrifying roadside drop-offs. It has now been a week. Can the Premier tell us which minister she's holding responsible? Exactly how many other victims of UCP motel medicine are there? How many similar contractors are still on the AHS discharge list? How many more motels are involved? And how long has she known this has been going on? And will the Premier take responsibility for setting this in motion when she endorsed motel medicine during her leadership?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, we knew that as we were going through looking at the bottleneck that we have in our acute care hospitals, that we had to identify some of the reasons for that bottleneck. And the reason is that we need to build more purpose-built facilities for those with complex needs. Our acute care hospitals need to be there for acute care needs. If somebody shows up for an emergency treatment, if somebody needs emergency surgery, if someone needs cancer treatment, if someone needs surgical treatment, those beds are highly valued. We cannot be having those kinds of care treatment put off because we don't have the right patient in the right place.
The Honourable Member for Calgary, Boular-McCall.
Mr. Speaker, Albertans are concerned about the prospect of moral medicine being inflicted on their loved ones. We know of at least 2 motels in Leduc area where this is happening, but neither the Minister of Health nor seniors seem to know the full scope of motel medicine that is occurring under their watch. So for the countless time, can the Premier advise this House exactly how many long-term care patients are currently getting care in motels? And if she doesn't know that, can she commit to tabling that information?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What I can tell the members opposite is that we know that there were 1,547 patients who were in acute care beds. When that happens, and they should be in alternative levels of care, it means that we can't get people in from emergency rooms. It means that we cannot get people into surgical suites. It means that there are delays in surgery. This is the reason why we have a cross-ministry working group now to identify the appropriate facilities with the appropriate partners so that we can put people in the appropriate place. Some of them have very complex needs, need mental health, addiction, and other types of supports, and that's what we're working on.
The honourable member for Calgary, Buller-McCall.
Mr. Speaker, I know that my constituents are worried about the prospect of modal medicine. They were concerned when the Premier campaigned on placing long-term care patients in modals during her leadership campaign, and they were concerned when this government removed the minimum hours of care from the regulation for continuing care. So this time to the minister, what oversight she is providing to those waiting in motel rooms for care? Are they performing site visits, check-ins? Is there any kind of oversight that minister can share with this House?
The Honourable the Premier has risen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are talking about three different things in that one question. The first thing that we're talking about is making sure that we are using our hospital services for hospital use. The second issue that we have is a housing issue. When somebody who has been discharged has very complex needs, we need to make sure that we are supporting them with the appropriate service provider if they've got mental health, addiction, homelessness, or other issues. Right. And then the third aspect is on the issue of continuing care and providing the appropriate level of care. We provide support for 3.62 hours of care for every patient, and the continuing care operators wanted more flexibility.
The honourable member for Calgary, Buller-McCall.
Mr. Speaker, this government's endless attempts to duck the responsibility is embarrassing to watch. This government owes it to Albertan to get to the bottom of this and ensure that no one is subjected to this kind of treatment in Alberta's healthcare. Albertans deserve to know how far this government modal medicine model has reached. Can the minister confirm how many Calgary area motel rooms have been reserved to be used for modal medicine? Does she know or does she care?
Yeah. The Honourable the Premier.
I can't answer that question. Zero, because this is not an extension of hospital care. What it is that a patient has been discharged, and as a result they have a housing issue, a mental health issue, an addiction issue, a homelessness issue. It requires a different type of care, which is why the Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services will be providing an appropriate type of service provider to match the needs of that particular discharged patient. Those who need hospital care, acute care, will be getting them in hospitals. That's the reason why we need to get alternative levels of care of patients in the right facility.
The honourable member for Edmonton Riverview.
No Albertan should ever be forced to face motel medicine, and those who have deserve an apology from this government, which sadly has not happened. Albertans deserve answers, and since this government clearly doesn't have them or is unwilling to share them, more is needed. Today, we've written to the Health Quality Council of Alberta to request that they look into this disturbing situation and ensure that no one ever has to experience motel medicine. Will the Premier join our call for the Health Quality Council to look into this?
Yeah. The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I mean, we're already looking into this. This is the reason why we have the cross-ministry task force. I would say the members opposite had the opportunity to identify the same issues that we did, that we had 1,500 alternative levels of care patient in acute care beds, which is causing us not to be able to deliver the acute care that people need. Meanwhile, we don't have enough of the facilities that are needed to provide the support, mental health, addiction, continuing care. They could have discovered that years ago and we would have been miles ahead. They didn't. We're beginning the process of building that out, and that is the reason we're going to continue with it.
Order. The honourable member for Edmonton Riverview.
Yesterday, we saw the Minister of Health and the Minister of Seniors take turns denying responsibility and passing the buck for the unacceptable treatment that Albertans have received under motel medicine. The Minister of Health claimed that the individual chose where they were sent, but we know that they were not told it was a motel room. Is one of these ministers willing to take responsibility for failing this Albertan, and will they start by supporting our call for the Health Quality Council to look into this?
Yeah. The Honourable the Premier has risen.
Mr. Speaker, as I've mentioned mentioned, we are all taking responsibility for making sure that our acute care beds are occupied by people who require acute care and making sure that we address appropriate care options for the 1,547 patients on any given day who need an alternative level of care. It's the reason why we are now refocusing Alberta Health Services. It's the reason why we have a cross-ministry working group that includes the Mental Health and Addictions Minister, the Seniors, Community and Social Services Minister, the Health Minister. We are addressing this issue so that everybody gets the care they need.
The honourable member for Edmonton Riverview.
Today, the CEO of AHS and the Minister of Health couldn't answer the simple question of whether these motels where patients had been sent had been vetted. This government is trying to pass the buck and failing the Albertans who were promised long-term care but ended up in a travel lodge. The minister didn't know how many AHS patients were receiving care from the agency or sending people to the Leduc Travel Lodge. A real investigation is needed, not a behind closed doors review. Under the Health Quality Council Act, the minister can request this. My question is simple, will she?
The Honourable, the Premier has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I mean, this is foundationally the problem, is that AHS has a job to do. They run our hospitals. They are supposed to deliver acute care, and then they make a decision to discharge patients, at which point it is now our responsibility through Seniors, Community and Social Services, Mental Health and Addiction, and continuing care to find the appropriate place for that patient to go. That is what we have identified. It's the reason we put together the press conference last week, where we said that we are going to be identifying the places and a process to discharge a patient to the appropriate level of care, and we're going to continue doing that.
The honourable member for Edmonton, Highlands, Norwood.
302, that's how many unhoused people died in Edmonton in 2023. This is 8 times the rate of death since before the pandemic. And in the first 78 days of 2024, Boyle Street Community Services received 72 death notifications for people who were experiencing homelessness. That's nearly 1 person a day. Yet we've just learned that Boyle Street and Bissell Centre have lost the critical funding they need to keep their day services open and to keep people alive. The Premier needs to step up and take responsibility. No blame on other orders of government, no excuses. Will she save these life-saving programs?
The Honourable Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the situation that's taking place on the street because of the drug epidemic is very sad, and this government sympathizes both with the individuals involved, the families that are involved, as well as the homeless providers that work with our government each and every day to help those individuals in that community. That's why we're focused on recovery. I want you to know, Mr. Speaker, we continue to fund both of the organizations that the Honourable Member refers to through our community-based organizations, which are funded by the Alberta government to the tune of millions of dollars. But both of those organizations put together, we will continue to work with all of our nonprofit providers to be able to provide access to services and ultimately help more people to get addiction supports.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Highlands, Norwood.
I've seen firsthand the incredible work that Bissell Centre and Boyle Street do in the communities that I represent. The day services that they provide are absolutely essential. They offer more than just coffee, meals, and laundry. They offer community, something that's needed more than ever. Most of the 302 unhoused people who died last year died from drug poisoning. Their deaths were preventable. Frontline workers have been clear. We desperately need harm reduction, housing, and psychological supports, along with addiction treatment, all of which can be offered through the programs that are at risk of closing. So I'm urging the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions to fund these life-saving programs. Will he?
The Honourable Minister of Mental Health and Addiction.
Mr. Speaker, the truth is the tragic loss of life from overdose and the addiction crisis we have was one run rampant, in part because of the homeless encampments that were existing in Edmonton. That's why our government took extraordinary steps to take down the encampments and get people into recovery supports through a Recovery Navigation Centre. These are the first steps we need to do to get people into recovery, which is the only solution to an addiction crisis. If you facilitate more addiction, you can expect to see tragically more overdoses and more death, and that's something this government will not stand for.
The order, the Honourable Member for Edmonton Highlands, Norwood.
I'm devastated to report that it's not just in Edmonton where critical services are closing. We've learned that the hub in Leduc will be closed. It's the only place for unhoused folks to go in that community. And we've just learned that Red Deer Street Ties outreach program for youth experiencing homelessness will also be closing after losing provincial funding. This is in the Minister of Health's own backyard. She proudly wears her Children First pin. I'm begging her to fund this life-saving program, the only of its kind in the entire Red Deer region. I am begging her to put children first. Minister, step up. Lives depend on it.
The Honourable the Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services.
Mr. Speaker, yelling in the legislature will not help these individuals. But I will tell you what will help these individuals.
Order. The Honourable the Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services.
I will tell you what will help these individuals is the largest investment in homeless supports in the history of the province, what this government is doing. The most shelter spaces in the history of the province, making sure we have capacity to be able to make sure that we can connect to recovery. And most importantly, Mr. Speaker, tearing down dangerous NDP drug-infested encampments that are costing people their lives, Mr. Speaker. No matter how much the opposition yells, we are going to continue to make sure that we help everybody who's facing homelessness in our province.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Foothills has a question.
Mr. Speaker, Albertans who are discharged from the hospital deserve proper care, not this Premier's preferred motel medicine. The Minister of Health and Minister of Seniors threw each other under the bus yesterday as they both claimed no one was responsible for this mess. But finally, the Minister of Seniors said, quote, "We saw the newspaper articles and have taken some action to ensure people are safe." So to the Minister, has motel medicine been stopped once and for all? And if so, how did it happen in the first place?
The Honourable the Minister of Seniors and Community Social Services.
Well, Mr. Speaker, again, to be clear, individuals are not receiving health services in these facilities, Mr. Speaker. These are individuals who have been discharged medically through the Alberta Health Services process and then have re-entered the community. We have come together amongst multiple departments to be able to make sure that AHS has the best list of appropriate service providers in the community. I want to reiterate to the House, Mr. Speaker, we do not fund the provider that is in question, Mr. Speaker. That said, we have taken steps, including setting the public guardian, to be able to make sure everybody is safe and receiving all of the appropriate services that they should.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member for Calgary Foothills.
Mr. Speaker, given that the Minister of Health says that Alberta Health Services does not accredit this agency, given that the Minister of Seniors says that his ministry has no relationships with this agency, given that the patients are somehow handed off to this agency from a hospital run by AHS, how is it that this agency could even be recommended to a patient for discharge referral?
The Honourable the Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services.
Mr. Speaker, I think that is an important question, which is why the Premier has put together a task force made up of the Department of Mental Health, my Department of Community and Social Services, and the Ministry of Health to be able to make sure that Alberta Health Services has access to the best list of providers that we work with each day that are in the community, Mr. Speaker. The reality is, obviously, we don't know every person and every organization that works in the nonprofit sector, Mr. Speaker, but we can provide advice to Alberta Health Services going forward on who are the best providers to work with, Mr. Speaker, to again make sure everybody is safe and receiving services in the community.
The Honourable Member.
Possibly know every organization that's taking a discharged patient. Mr. Speaker, given that this Premier said motel medicine is her preferred method of health care in this province, given that she has instructed the Minister of Health and Minister of Seniors to clear hospitals by any means necessary, given that there is a lack of both hospital beds and long-term care beds in our growing province, what exactly is the plan from this government to ensure discharged patients receive the right care, since they failed to do anything more than introduce motel medicine to this province?
The Honourable the Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services.
Mr. Speaker, as the Premier has said today, sadly underneath the NDP government, thousands of people were left in the wrong beds in hospital. Mr. Speaker, I could think of nothing that would be more inhumane than that, to leave individuals who have done their medical process to lie on wards in the healthcare system. We want to be able to make sure those individuals can return to their community, receive the supports that they may need to in complex cases, and be able to go on to have productive, healthy, thriving lives in the community, Mr. Speaker. And that is the work that we are doing as we make sure that we develop a new continuing care organization to care for all of the vulnerable individuals that need so in that organization, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Lougheed is next.
Mr. Speaker, last fall, our government announced the refocusing of Alberta's healthcare system that will prioritize comprehensive primary care and empower frontline healthcare workers in delivering world-class care. As our healthcare is undergoing the recommended changes and reshaping efforts, Albertans have been invited to participate in the process. Valuable feedback from healthcare workers, professionals, and the public have been documented from these sessions. Can the Minister of Health please provide an update on how refocusing engagements have been going so far?
The Honourable Minister of Health has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. Healthcare workers, patients, families, caregivers, and community leaders from right across Alberta have been helping to shape the future of healthcare. This is one of the largest in-person public engagements ever undertaken by Alberta's government. More than 2,500 people have participated in the in-person sessions, with an additional 18,000 Albertans providing their feedback through online tools and almost 10,000 participating in virtual town halls. I'm thrilled that Albertans are actively taking part in reshaping our healthcare system and being part of the historic change.
Calgary Lougheed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to the Given that frontline healthcare workers are vital to understanding the current challenges Albertans are facing in regard to wait times and access to care, and given that their unique perspective and input is critical to establishing a new, well-rounded healthcare delivery system, can the same minister explain how the healthcare workforce is involved in refocusing transition, and how will you ensure that they are properly engaged?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, Alberta's government is committed to engaging with healthcare workers throughout the refocusing process and afterwards. Alberta Health will ensure to keep conversations going with a variety of future engagement opportunities and visitations. This has to be ongoing. We want to empower frontline workers to help shape a healthcare system that will continue to meet the needs of Albertans for generations to come. Mr. Speaker, these conversations have brought Albertans together, and we're encouraged by the feedback and enthusiasm for an improved healthcare system for our province. Mr. Speaker, we now have a Parliamentary Secretary for Health Workforce Engagement as well.
The order, the Honourable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the Minister for that answer. Given that there are still many Albertans that would like to attend an engagement session, and given that there are many healthcare professionals who still need to share their thoughts, and further given that our province is currently underway in establishing the 4 specialized organizations of primary care, acute care, continuing care, and mental health and addiction, can the Minister provide next steps on this process?
The Honourable Minister.
Happy to, Mr. Speaker. Current in-person engagement sessions will wrap up in mid-April, which will conclude a total of 66 in-person engagement sessions from right across the province. As the work to refocus Alberta's healthcare system continues, new engagement opportunities will be developed for Albertans and frontline workers to continue providing important input and advice. We're on the right path to creating a refocused healthcare system that works for all Albertans, and we are prepared and delighted to listen to all essential feedback along the way. Mr. Speaker, I've taken part in many of them. They're great.
The Honourable Member for Banff, Kananaskis, has a question.
One of the things I love best about Alberta is its natural beauty. The mountains and the eastern slopes are gorgeous, but there's much more. Every Albertan knows that a patch of native grassland waving in the breeze is hypnotizing. River valleys through prairie coulees stir imaginations. The Alberta Badlands draw people from around the world. And the vast boreal forest is resplendent with northern charm. This question may sound fluffy, Mr. Speaker, but so is using pristine viewscapes as a regulatory mechanism. Why does the minister keep telling us the only viewscape worth protecting is the eastern slopes?
The Honourable the Minister of Affordability and Utilities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the question. This topic is a topic of conversation around the world. Every jurisdiction has areas that they're proud of and want to make sure that they protect for tourism to enjoy for generations. That's exactly what we're doing here in Alberta, protecting our majestic Rocky Mountains and those lovely foothills, as well as the UNESCO World Heritage Sites. This is what Albertans wanted. This is what we are delivering.
The Honourable Member for Banff, Kananaskis.
Well, given that the grasslands and the Badlands aren't near the eastern slopes, I guess they're not as beautiful. Given that the minister claims these regulations have been developed based on a vertical footprint, another UCP made-up term, given that a pump jack is around 40 feet tall and a cell tower about 115 feet high, and given that many Albertans look out their window to see more than one pump jack and maybe even a few industrial smokestacks, and given that solar arrays have comparatively little vertical footprint, can the minister explain how pump jacks and cell towers somehow do not impede viewscapes, or can he admit this policy just doesn't make sense?
The Honourable the Minister of Affordability and Utilities.
I'm happy to correct the record and correct the members opposite. Visual impact assessments have always been part of our development within Alberta. They will continue to do so. We just set a threshold limit on that for something as tall as the Calgary Tower, impeding the view of our majestic Rocky Mountains, Banff National Park, and beautiful lakes and surrounding areas. This is completely reasonable, which is probably why rural municipalities support these kind of initiatives in over 80%. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Banff Kananaskis.
Well, given that the minister can't really explain these things because beauty is in the eye of the beholder and a pristine viewscape is a measure of everything and nothing at the same time, and given what businesses really value most in development is clear, consistent, transparent regulations, given that the government objectives to achieve net zero are dependent on harnessing renewable emissions-free energy, can the minister explain how we will reach emission targets without holding Alberta's energy development back and acting as if oil and gas are the only ways to produce energy?
The Honourable Minister of Affordability and Utilities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Nothing's clearer than the map document that we released last week, which a picture's worth 1,000 words. It clarifies for everybody in the industry exactly where those boundaries are and to protect those lovely viewscapes. And we've always said that renewable energy, both wind and solar, are part of the mixture that we need to get to a carbon neutral future. So is nuclear, so is biomass, so is geothermal. That's why we're creating regulations that the NDP failed to do under their time, where they just created a train wreck for all of these policies costing Albertans billions and billions of dollars that we're still paying for and will be paying for years to come. We're setting the record straight and we're making a better plan for the future.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Decor is next.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Edmonton Decor has 605 out of the 10,800 community housing units regulated through Alberta Housing Act. Almost all government-owned units were built between 1970 and 72. Due to the continued deferred maintenance, these units are in extremely bad shape. In Edmonton Decor, the city and the Civita-owned units are maintained, but the government-owned housing units require major maintenance. Can the minister explain to Albertans why the UCP has failed to address the major maintenance needed in the government-owned housing stocks across the province?
The Honourable the Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services.
Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, we've seen governments of multiple stripes not take seriously the need to maintain our own affordable housing stock. But not this government, Mr. Speaker. Last year, we invested $115 million to advance capital maintenance and renewal of our own stock to be able to take more units back online and to be able to make sure that our important affordable housing stock can continue to do its job. This upcoming budget, which I hope the honourable member votes for, includes about $125 million more to be able to go towards capital maintenance and renewal. And I am happy to report every housing authority has supported this budget exactly because of that reason.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Decor.
Given that housing adequacy and suitability is measured by the amount of major repairs required by those units, and given that residents continually reach to my office regarding the dire conditions of the units and the maintenance they need, given that the Alberta Housing Social Corporation owned housing units in Baldwin, 46 units, in Dickinsville, 134 units, in Delton, 50 units are way behind on maintenance. Can the minister tell tenants in these government-owned housing units when the ministry will stop deferring the maintenance?
Good question. The Honourable Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services.
Mr. Speaker, I think the NDP are having trouble listening, or they can't pivot from their notes when they do get an answer, but I'll reiterate the answer, Mr. Speaker. This government invested $115 million in the last fiscal year. In fact, I increased it in the middle of the year as the minister to move forward with capital maintenance and renewal. We have another $125 million taking place in this year, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, the NDP did not do any of that work when they were in government, Mr. Speaker. But again, all the housing providers, including the ones the honourable member refers to, support our budget for this reason, Mr. Speaker. And I sure hope the NDP will vote for that important line.
The honourable member for Edmonton Decor.
Given that we are not debating on budget, given that the government 10-year strategic plan includes selling the Alberta Social Housing Corporation owned units, and given that this government has been delaying maintenance over the years, given that those Albertans who call these units their home live in poor conditions that will impact their health and well-being, will the minister commit that his government is not planning to sell Alberta Social Housing Corporation owned units?
Oh, good question. The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, again, the NDP got to try it a little bit harder. I understand that they really need their notes when they're in the legislature, but I answered the question twice, so I'd like to answer it again. Yes, which is why we are investing $125 million in this budget, Mr. Speaker, and I really hope the honourable member will take the time to vote for the budget, Mr. Speaker, because it's very important that this money goes forward to continue to fix maintenance, particularly because the NDP, when they were in power, did no maintenance at all for this important organizations that we depend on to house our seniors and other low-income individuals in the province.
The honourable member for the Kompanoka has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. World demand for renewable fuels is rising. Generally speaking, biodiesel is produced from oils such as soy, palm, and canola, while ethanol is produced from cereals like corn and wheat. Given that Alberta farmers are among the world's largest producers of both canola and wheat, and given over-reliance on corn for ethanol is driving up beef production costs and impacting food prices, and given biodiesel is an important additive to our economy, to the Minister of Agriculture, what is the Government of Alberta doing to encourage the production of ethanol and biodiesel using canola and wheat grown right here in Alberta?
The Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member for that question. It gives us a great chance to highlight how diverse our agricultural industry is, and there are great opportunities in the bio-industrial processing area. And we combine that, Mr. Speaker, with the fact that I don't have to tell you, we have the best farmers and ranchers in the world who have built a strong oilseed and wheat production here in the province. Our government has also incentivized production in this area through our agri-processing investment tax credit, 12% refundable tax credit on investment over $10 million. We are players in this space in future.
The honourable member for the Kompanoka.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given a minimum average of 5% of gasoline must include renewable alcohol or ethanol, and a minimum average of 2% of diesel must include biodiesel, and given only 2 of the 28 approved renewable alcohol fuel and only 1 of the 23 approved biodiesel providers have their production at an Alberta-based facility, and given that the vast majority of these providers operate outside of Canada, to the Minister of Environment, how many quality private sector jobs can be created by supporting Alberta-based renewable fuel production using Alberta-grown crops produced in Alberta's rural communities?
The Minister of Environment and Protected Areas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I do want to thank the member for that important question, because this is a great example of how we can absolutely reduce emissions while creating jobs, Mr. Speaker. Dozens of major new liquid biofuels projects have already been announced, creating more than 1,400 jobs and a combined value of over $2.5 billion. Alberta is positioned than anywhere in Canada to increase biofuel production, and it will continue to create new jobs. Mr. Speaker, it's not just biodiesel. We can produce renewable natural gas, ethanol, and hopefully in time sustainable aviation fuels as well.
The honourable member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the Minister. Given that Alberta's taxpayers are rightfully wary of government boondoggles like the Sturgeon refinery, and given that mechanisms like capital cost tax credits offer less risk than subsidies, corporate welfare, and direct taxpayer investment, to the Minister of Environment, can Albertans be assured that this government will not directly risk money on renewable fuel production?
To the same Minister.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. I can assure this House that we won't make the mistakes that past governments have when it comes to picking winners and losers. But we will encourage biofuel investments through practical and effective approaches that, of course, save money and drive future investment. Our tier system here in Alberta currently incentivizes biofuel and biogas, including landfill gas, diverted organic waste, animal manure, and wastewater projects. For example, under tier, carbon offsets can be generated by using ag waste to produce renewable natural gas. We'll continue to look for ways to support this sector and hard-working Albertans that work within it.
The honourable member for Calgary Klein is next.
Another broken promise from this government and a broken healthcare system this government has a responsibility to fix. Mr. Speaker, as the week goes on, we're hearing that the first patient is just one of many shipped down the highway to receive substandard care outside of the healthcare system. And what's worse, once they're outside of that healthcare system, they no longer have the ability to escalate the issues that they've experienced. My constituents are wondering if they're safe to be discharged from hospital at all. So to the Minister, how many Calgarians receiving care in hospital have been discharged to motels in my city?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, we have been very clear that in this particular case, the individual worked with the social worker within Alberta Health Services. When they had completed their course of medical treatment, they then were, together with their social worker and other allied health professionals, chose the site that they wanted to go to, the provider. The provider was not transparent with the client. They should have told them where they were taking them. That is unacceptable, and we're looking to correct that.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Klein.
Making a choice requires knowing what those choices are. So given that this government finds a way to choose private health care at every opportunity, and given that this government is picking apart and dismantling public health care through private surgeries, private facilities, and cancelling the public hospitals Albertans need, and given that the patients now staying at private motels when they've been led to believe that they'll be discharged to safe, supportive places to live, are the people this government is discharging to motels at least eligible for a points program in this motel scheme?
Good question.
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, it's apparent the members opposite are really good at theatre, but Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we want to solve real problems. Mr. Speaker, we have identified a gap in the process, and we are going to do everything possible to...
Order. Honourable members will come to order. The Minister of Health.
As I said, Mr. Speaker, they like to yell and scream, but at the end of the day, they don't actually do the work. We're doing the work to make sure that every patient that leaves hospital, even when they do not require medical care any longer, when they require housing, that they will actually get the supports that they need, Mr. Speaker. We've got a cross-ministry approach, and Mr. Speaker, I'm confident that we will get the job done.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Klein.
Given that all this motel medicine actually starts with the Premier, who said publicly that she wants patients discharged to motels,
wow.
And given that the Premier said she's discharged hundreds of Albertans to clear out overcapacity in hospitals struggling to find space for backlog surgeries, and given that Calgarians rightly deserve to know whether this whole scheme is a plan to further private health care, can the Minister of Health assure my constituents today that no more patients will be sent to a motel, yes or no?
The Honourable Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services.
Mr. Speaker, again, the NDP are having trouble listening. There are 0 patients being treated in hospital, Mr. Speaker. Patients are treated in the hospital through the healthcare system. When patients have been successfully treated, they are discharged, Mr. Speaker. And yes, we do have sometimes complex situations that require multiple ministry approaches, which is what the Premier is doing. So what the Premier is doing, Mr. Speaker, is making sure people are in appropriate levels of care, unlike what the NDP did, Mr. Speaker, and that's what we're going to continue to do. While I understand the NDP want the homeless to live in tents and seniors to live in hospitals, we want to make sure everybody lives in appropriate beds for their care.
The Honourable Member for Bonnyville, Cold Lake, St. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Albertans across this province, including those in my constituency of Bonnyville, Cold Lake, St. Paul, are struggling to pay their utility bills right now. This is particularly bad in rural Alberta, as they have to pay significantly higher distribution and transmission fees than the larger cities of Edmonton and Calgary. This is insufferable. To the Minister of Affordability and Utilities, are there any supports being planned for my constituents and the rural Albertans to alleviate these unbearable fees.
The order, the Honourable the Minister of Affordability and Utilities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Alberta's government is currently reviewing all aspects of our electricity system, including transmission and distribution planning. Albertans can expect to hear more on that soon. In the meantime, I strongly encourage Albertans to contact the Utilities Consumer Advocate if they are struggling to pay their bills. The UCA has resources to help Albertans better understand and lower their utility bills. So whether it's your small business, your farm or your household, the UCA and our government are there to help.
Good answer. The Honourable the Minister or Member for Bonnyville Cold Lake St. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the same minister. Given that another issue that I'm hearing about is the high electricity prices and the practice of economic withholding, where generators offer their electricity at very high prices to gouge consumers of their hard-earned money, to the same minister, could you please elaborate on the government's recent announcement to improve rules surrounding economic withholdings?
The Honourable the Minister of Affordability and Utilities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the member for the question. High and volatile electricity prices are top concern for our government. Based on the recommendations of the MSA and the ISO, we are modernizing Alberta's electricity system, something the NDP failed to do while they were in government. On top of that, the NDP continued to cost ratepayers and taxpayers billions of dollars. We've implemented temporary measures to protect Albertans from economic withholding. This will prevent spikes on Albertans' utilities bills until our balanced and responsible long-term plan can be implemented before 2027.
The Honourable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the same minister. Given that these regulatory changes, as well as additional generation capacity under construction in Alberta, should have a real impact to affordability for consumers, could the same minister please elaborate on further plans of the Government of Alberta to improve affordability of energy generation, distribution, transmission for my constituents and those in rural Alberta?
The Honourable Minister.
Again, Mr. Speaker, as part of my mandate from the Premier, we are working to ensure that the electricity grid is affordable, reliable, and sustainable for generations to come. We are reviewing and modernizing all aspects of that electricity system, from transmission and distribution costs to local access fees, as well as Alberta's generation capacity and the overall market's efficiency and optimization. Albertans can expect to see our full plans before the end of this year.
Member for Calgary Edgemont is next.
I'm glad the minister committed to ensuring Albertans will have self-referral for mammograms starting at age 40 because of some NDP advocacy. I look forward to hearing the formal announcement before summer. On the topic of cancer screenings, an HPV test is less invasive, more comfortable, and more effective at identifying pre-cancer cells than a Pap test. Pap tests are only 60% accurate, HPV tests 90% accurate, and can be done at home. Will the minister provide a timeline for when the pilot project will transition all Albertans who need it to finally have access to HPV tests?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We continue to improve services for women and for other Albertans in cancer screening right across this province. It's a priority. It's on my mandate letter. I'm continuing to work with organizations and with the health foundations that are actually doing some good research in this area. So, Mr. Speaker, we are committing to continually doing improvement in these areas, and we'll always do improvements because we want to get better as we move forward. So, Mr. Speaker, yes, we will continue to improve in all of these areas.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Edgemont.
I'm so glad that the government agrees with the Alberta NDP. Given that the government had a pilot program for this model back in October, and given that the move for HPV tests is part of the Canada-wide goal to eliminate cervical cancer by 2040, and given that all Albertans want access to the best and most effective cancer screening practices, we're urging the UCP to immediately implement this life-saving program province-wide. Can the minister promise Albertans that HPV tests will be available for everyone who needs ones by the summer?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, we have HPV testing, and also there's a lot of work going on in this area. I can actually tell you that I was in the new cancer center, the Arthur E. Child Cancer Center, that is going to be opening this fall. It is amazing. It'll be the best of its kind in all of Canada. Mr. Speaker, there is so much happening in cancer screening, but also in cancer innovations that we are happy to be promoting across this province. Mr. Speaker, we know that in Alberta we're leaders and we will continue to be leaders in this area.
The honourable member without the use of a preamble.
Given that British Columbia implemented HPV self-testing province-wide for those who request the test, and countries like New Zealand have already made this change, and given that 100% of cervical cancer cases in Canada are attributed to the HPV virus, and given that I truly believe that we are all united in the vision to build a cervical cancer-free Alberta together, can the minister explain why a pilot program was implemented first, and how much longer will Albertans have to wait before they can access this life-saving test?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Speaker, pilot programs often happen so that we can make sure that we are actually doing what we need to do to improve services, Mr. Speaker. So they're a way of ensuring that we get the information, do the research, collect the data that needs to be done so that we can scale programs across the province, or whether they're worthy of scaling. So, Mr. Speaker, we will continue to do the work that needs to be done. We are leaders in innovation in this area, and so, Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue to do that. We're committed to making sure that there is constant improvement within our healthcare system, particularly in cancer screening and other screenings. So thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're going to continue to improve.
The honourable member for Edmonton Gold Bar.
Paul McLaughlin, President of the Rural Municipalities of Alberta, had some scathing words for the Alberta Energy Regulator and this government. Over 6 years, the RMA has tallied over $250 million in unpaid property taxes from what McLaughlin calls zombie oil and gas companies. The RMA keeps counting because the number keeps growing, with $43 million in unpaid taxes in 2023 alone. To the minister, does the government think it's fair for hardworking Albertans to pay their property taxes while oil companies get a free ride?
The Honourable Minister of Municipal Affairs.
No, Mr. Speaker, I've answered this question before, and I'll be happy to repeat it for those that need that extra help. Mr. Speaker, if anybody was at RMA, on the other side, they would know that we dealt with this issue several times. The president of RMA, Paul McLaughlin, and I have worked closely on this for a number of years. As members in the House know, with their cooperation and their encouragement, we passed Bill 7, which allowed municipalities to sue oil and gas companies. Those that behaved badly did more. So working with the energy minister, they added on Directive 67.
If the honourable member for Calgary, Bill R. McCall, would like to ask a question, I encourage him to rise to his feet and do so. Until it's his turn, the honourable member for Edmonton Gold Bar has the call.
Given I'm grateful that the minister recounted his record of failure on this file, and given that McLaughlin notes that oil companies avoiding property taxes could be a sign that they may be unwilling to meet their other regulatory obligations, or an example of bad faith towards Albertans who do pay their taxes, or both, and given that Alberta's rural municipalities manage the majority of the roads and bridges these companies use for transport, many of which exist solely for the energy industry, to the minister, the AER itself states that holding a license for energy development in Alberta is a privilege, not a right. Any chance this government can start proving it by making these companies pay their taxes?
The Honourable Minister of Municipal Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, after we made progress with the first two things I recounted in my first answer, there are companies, mostly foreign-owned, that are determined to not be good corporate citizens, to not pay their property taxes, to not pay their surface leases, and we continue, and I continue to work closely with the President of RMA, Paul McLaughlin, and all municipalities on this important issue. So, Mr. Speaker, there is an issue there. Certainly, the President of RMA thinks that the Alberta Energy Regulator is part of the solution. I will commit to working with our Energy Minister to see if that is indeed the case.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Gold Bar.
Given the minister used the word progress when I think he meant failure, and given that oil is an Alberta resource, not just an oil company resource, and therefore the profits from the resource should be given to all Albertans, and given that McLaughlin notes that these zombie oil companies operate just poorly enough that the AER won't force them to pay their property taxes or account for their reclamation liabilities, and that Albertans need the AER to do its job and be a regulator, not their friend. To the minister, rural Alberta needs roads, bridges, and improved services that rely on? Why are Albertans paying more in property taxes while oil companies get...
The Honourable Minister of Municipal Affairs.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's true, and we will continue. This is an issue with a small number of companies. Even Paul McLaughlin and the RMA acknowledge that the vast majority of oil and gas companies are great corporate citizens, pay their taxes on time, pay their surface leases on the time, but there are a small number, usually foreign owned, that don't seem to care about Alberta, don't seem to care about Canada, don't seem to care about anything. So the problem with bad behavior is no matter how many rules you put in place, they're always looking for another way around it. And Mr. Speaker, we're not going to quit until we get on top of this thing. We'll work hand in hand with rural municipalities on this.
The Honourable Member for Cypress Medicine Hat has a question to ask.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Droughts cause distress for many Albertans. Instead of summer being a time where Alberta families can relax and enjoy our waterways, they're worried about drought. These past few years have been hard on our ranchers, our farmers, and our livestock producers. Hardworking Alberta families have had to worry about dry conditions instead of growing their family farm. Mr. Speaker, can the Minister of Environment and Protected Areas share what our government is doing to conserve and collect water when we know that every drop counts?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Protected Areas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the member for the question. Of course, Alberta's winter has been warmer and drier than average, and it's not just us, Mr. Speaker. Over 70% of Canada is experiencing drought conditions this spring. As I've shared with this House, the largest water sharing agreement conversations are right now underway, as most of our senior water licensees are working with us to voluntarily create agreements to help make sure that everybody has access to water in times of drought. We're also focusing on new and better ways to manage water, led by our new Water Advisory Committee. The member is, in fact, chairing this committee, and I do want to thank him for his great work.
The Honourable Member for Cypress Medicine Hat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful for the initiatives and what our government is doing to develop and protect our watersheds. And given that this winter snowpacks are below average, our rivers are at near record lows, and multiple reservoirs are well below capacity, and further given we must allow 50% of our water to flow to Saskatchewan, with some reports showing that we're actually allowing 51 to 60% of our water to flow to Saskatchewan, many in my constituency are wondering about on-stream storage. Can the minister please share what the government will do to secure water on the on-stream storage method going forward?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Protected Areas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We absolutely know that water storage is critical to the health of our province and, of course, our economy. If the NDP had invested more into water storage, we would be cutting ribbons on new reservoirs today. We will not make that mistake, Mr. Speaker. This year's budget includes $23 million over 3 years for improving the province's water management system. This also includes $4.5 million to study a new Ardley water reservoir in the Red Deer Basin. More work is also underway to find locations to build new reservoirs and dams that protect not only Calgary but other communities along the Bow River. Better water storage means more water for families.
The Honourable Member for Cypress Medicine Hat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that the South Saskatchewan, Bow, Old Man Rivers all flow through the heart of our agri-food corridor, our government announced that we're going to be investing $3.5 million to help make the province more naturally drought resilient, prevent floods, and improve water quality. And further, given that ag producers and the constituents in Cypress Medicine Hat are looking for better on-stream storage in our region to ensure regional sustainability, can the minister please share when Southeast Alberta can see on-stream storage projects to ensure the proper storage matches the needs of municipalities, industry, ag producers, and the environment?
The Honourable the Minister.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. This is absolutely a priority, and we recognize the unique needs and challenges specifically faced by southeastern Alberta. That's why, as I was mentioning, part of that $23 million invested over 3 years, my department will be launching a province-wide review to determine where new water storage projects are needed most and what kinds of projects would be most beneficial for our province. This will include a close look at the needs and water sources in the southeast and ways that we can help maximize our storage while still meeting our agreement with our neighbours to the east.
Members, that concludes the time allotted for oral question period. In 30 seconds or less, we will continue to the remainder of the daily routine. Honourable members, if the remaining members want to quickly make their way to the door. Honourable members, the point of order from 201 has been withdrawn, and I would like to make a brief statement about private members' business. Honourable members, I'd like to take a moment to outline the order of precedence for private members' bills on Monday, March 25th. As members will note, the long order paper for today, which includes private members' business, indicates that both Bill 203, Foreign Credentials Advisory Committee Act, and Bill 204, Municipal Government National Parks Amendment Act 2023, are due on day 30 of the projected sitting day calendar. Monday, March 25th will be day 30. So the question arises, which bill will receive precedence and therefore be dealt with first on Monday afternoon? The authority for this is Standing Order 9-1, which provides that all items standing on the order paper except government bills and orders shall be taken up accordance to the precedence assigned to each on the order paper. And Standing Order 8-7 provides that a private member's bill will be called in committee of the whole within 8 sitting days of receiving second reading and within 4 sitting days after being reported by committee of the whole. While rare, the situation has arisen a number of times in the past. On March 20th, 2003, former Speaker Kowalski faced a similar situation in which Bill 203, which was at Committee of the Whole, and Bill 202, which was at third reading, and both bills were due on the next private member's day. Speaker Kowalski held that in such instances, the, quote, order of precedence is determined by the date and the time that the Assembly or the Committee of the Whole has made its decision in respect of the bills. He concluded that because Bill 203 received second reading before Bill 202 was reported out of Committee of the Whole, Bill 203 would be considered in Committee of the Whole before Bill 202 would be considered at third reading. Members, I'm sure you will be interested to find Speaker Kowalski's ruling in its entirety on pages 650 and 651 of March 20th, 2023 Alberta Hansard. In our situation, Bill 204 received second reading on March 11th, Bill 2024, while Bill 203 was reported out of Committee of the Whole on March 18th, 2024. Therefore, the Assembly completed consideration of Bill 204 before it completed consideration of Bill 203. The Assembly shall deal with Bill 204, Municipal Government National Urban Parks Amendment Act 2023 first on Monday afternoon, despite both bills sharing the same due date. Orders of the day, orders du jour.
Message from Her Honour, the Honourable the Lieutenant Governor.
The Honourable the President of Treasury Board, the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I've received a message from Her Honour, the Honourable the Lieutenant Governor, which I now transmit to you.
Order. All rise, please.
Christina, when do you want me to ask for 1 minute? Thank you, sir. When do you want me to ask for 1 minute?
The Lieutenant Governor transmits supplementary supply estimates of certain sums required for the service of the province for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024, and recommends the same to the Legislative Assembly. Please be seated. The Honourable the Minister of Finance and the President of Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, I now wish to table the 2023-2024 supplementary supply estimates along with an update to the 2023-2024 fiscal plan as required by the Sustainable Fiscal Planning and Transparency Act. This 2023-2024 fiscal plan update contains no changes from the information provided in the 2024-2027 fiscal plan tabled for Budget 2024. The documents I'm tabling today reflect some of the realities we've faced and the needs we've addressed since Budget 2023 was tabled in February of last year. Mr. Speaker, in total, the supplementary supply estimates will allow additional spending by 13 government departments. When passed, the estimates will authorize approximate increases of $412.7 million in expense funding, $4.5 million in capital funding for the government, and $304.1 million in other financial transactions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Government motions. Motion number 29, Honourable Mr. Horner.
The Honourable the President of Treasury Board, the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I now move government motion number 29. Be it resolved that the message from Her Honour, the Honourable the Lieutenant Governor, the 2023-2024 supplementary supply estimates for the General Revenue Fund and all matters connected therewith be referred to Committee of Supply.
Honourable members, this is a debatable motion pursuant to Standing Order 18.1I. Are there any other members wishing to speak? Seeing none, I am prepared to call on the Honourable Minister of Finance to close debate. The Honourable Minister of Finance to close debate. Honourable members, having heard the motion as proposed by the Honourable the President of Treasury Board, the Minister of Finance, Government Motion 29. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. No. In my opinion, the ayes have it. That motion is carried and so ordered.
Honourable Mr. Horner.
The Honourable the Government House Leader, I think, has risen, perhaps on a point of order or otherwise.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to request unanimous consent to go to 1-minute bells for the remainder of the day on all votes. Is that okay to ask that now, really?
Yes, you just need to include a request for the first vote after entering into committee.
Okay, sure. Thought I'd ask for unanimous consent for 1-minute bells for all votes after the first vote in Committee of the Whole. Or, sorry, Committee of Supply, rather.
Including.
Including.
I will restate the motion, perhaps, for the benefit of the Assembly. The Honourable the Government House Leader has moved a request for unanimous consent for 1-minute bells for the remainder of today's sitting, including the first bell after entering into Committee of the Whole. I will ask only one question. Is there anyone opposed? If so, indicate now. Unanimous consent is granted. Go ahead. The Honourable the Minister of Finance, President of Treasury Board on Government Motion 30.
Mr. Speaker, I now move government motion 30. Be it resolved that pursuant to Standing Order 61-2, the Committee of Supply shall be called to consider the 2023-2024 supplementary supply estimates for 3 hours on Monday, March 25th, 2024.
Members, pursuant to Standing Order 61-2, this is not a debatable motion. Having heard the motion as proposed by the Honourable the President of the Treasury Board, the Minister of Finance, all those in favour of the motion for Government Motion 30, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. No. In my opinion, the ayes have it. That motion is carried and so ordered.
Committee of Supply.
I'll just wait with that.
Members, I'd like to call committee to order. Prior to beginning, I will outline the process for this afternoon. The Committee of Supply will first call on the chairs of the legislative policy committees to report on their meetings with the various ministries under their mandate. No vote is required when these reports are presented. The committee will then proceed to vote on the estimates of the offices of the Legislative Assembly. The vote on the main estimates will then take place. Finally, I'd like to remind all honourable members of Standing Order 32.3, which provides that. Never mind. We just did unanimous consent on division bells. So now I'd like to invite the Chair of the Standing Committee of Alberta's Economic Future to present the committee's report. The Honourable Member for Lac St. Anne Parkland.
Yeah, thank you. And I do have something on my desk that I can look at and reference. I appreciate the table for catching them. As Chair of the Standing Committee on Alberta's Economic Futures and pursuant to Standing Order 590110, I am pleased to report that the committee has reviewed the 2024-25 proposed estimates and the business plans for the following ministries: Advanced Education, Agriculture and Irrigation, Arts, Culture and the Status of Women, Executive Council, Immigration and Multiculturalism, Infrastructure, Jobs, Economy and Trade, Technology and Innovation, Tourism and Sport. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll now call on the Chair of the Standing Committee on Families and Communities to present the committee's report, the Honourable Member for Canmore.
As Chair of the Standing Committee on Families and Communities and pursuant to Standing Order 59.0110, I'm pleased to report that the committee has reviewed the 2024-2025 proposed estimates and business plans for the following ministries: Ministry of Children and Family Services, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Mental Health and Addiction, Ministry of Public Safety and Emergency Services, Ministry of Seniors, Community and Social Services, Ministry of Service Alberta, and Red Tape Reduction. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And now the Chair of the Standing Committee of Resource Stewardship, the Honourable Member for Vermilion Lloydminster Wainwright.
As Chair of the Standing Committee of Resource Stewardship and pursuant to Standing Order 59.1010, I'm pleased to report that the committee has reviewed the 2024-2025 proposed estimates and business plans for the following ministries: Ministry of Affordability and Utilities, Ministry of Energy and Minerals, Ministry of Environment and Protected Areas, Ministry of Forestry and Parks, Ministry of Indigenous Relations, Ministry of Municipal Affairs, Ministry of Transportation and Economic Corridors, Ministry of Treasury Board and Finance. Thank you.
Thank you. We shall now proceed to the vote on the 2024-25 Offices of the Legislative Assembly Estimates General Revenue Fund pursuant to Standing Order 5903 Sub 5, which requires that these estimates be decided without debate or amendment prior to the vote on the main estimates. I must now put the following question. On all matters relating to the 2024-25 Offices of the Legislative Assembly Estimates General Revenue Fund for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2025, $157,918,000. Are you agreed? Are there any opposed? Carried. Shall the vote be reported? Are you agreed? Any opposed? Carried. We shall now proceed to the final vote on the main estimates. Those members in favour of the resolutions for the 2024-25 Government Estimates General Revenue Fund for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2025, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Carried. Shall the vote? Their division has been called. Ring the bells. Honourable members, the division has been called on the 2024-25 Government Estimates General Revenue Fund. All those in favour, please stand.
Honourable Mr. Guthrie, Honourable Mr. Glubish, Honourable Mr. Nicolaides, Honourable Ms. Schultz, Honourable Mr. Williams, Honourable Minister LaGrange, Honourable Mr. Horner, Honourable Mr. Scow, Honourable Ms. Smith, Honourable Mr. Ellis, Honourable Mr. Amory, Honourable Mr. Newdorf, Honourable Mr. Wilson, Honourable Mr. Dreeshen, Honourable Mr. Nixon, Mr. Yao, Honourable Mr. Turton, Honourable Mr. Nally, Honourable Mr. McIver, Honourable Ms. Furr, Honourable Mr. Jones, Honourable Mrs. Sawney, Mr. Getson, Honourable Mr. Sigurdsson, Honourable Mr. Yassin, Honourable Mr. Hunter, Mr. Rosewell, Mr. Van Dyken, Mr. Sear, Mr. Lunty, Mr. Weeb, Mr. Boychenko, Mr. McDougall, Mr. Wright, Ms. Petrovic, Mr. Stephan, Mr. Dick, Ms. Armstrong-Hominick, Ms. DeYoung, Mr. Sinclair, Mr. Bouchard, Mr. Singh, Ms. Lovely, Mrs. Johnson.
Any opposed, please stand.
Ms. Algenaid, Member Arkan Paul, Honourable Ms. Gray, Honourable Ms. Sigurdsson, Mr. Kozowski, Ms. Chapman, Mr. Haji, Member Tejada, Member Irwin, Mr. Ip, Mr. Shepherd, Member Aramenko, Ms. Pancholi, Mr. Dack, Honourable Mr. Schmidt.
Madam Chair, total for the motion 44, total against 15.
Members, that is carried. Shall the vote be reported? Are you agreed? Any opposed? It's carried. I'd now like to invite the Honourable Government House Leader to move that the committee rise and report the 2024-25 Offices of the Legislative Assembly Estimates General Revenue Fund of the 2024-25 Government Estimates General Revenue Fund. The Honourable Government House Leader.
That's exactly how I would have said it. Madam Chair, I move that the committee rise and report the 2024-2025 Offices of the Legislative Assembly Estimates General Revenue Fund and the 2024-2025 Government Estimates General Revenue Fund.
You heard the motion to rise and report. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. So carried. Okay.
The Honourable, the Chair of Committees.
Mr. Speaker, the Committee of Supply has had under consideration certain resolutions relating to the 2024-25 Offices of the Legislative Assembly Estimates General Revenue Fund and the 2024-25 Government Estimates General Revenue Fund report as follows and request leave to sit again. The following resolutions for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2025 have been approved. Offices of the Legislative Assembly, support to the Legislative Assembly, $84,854,000. Office of the Auditor General, $29,620,000. Office of the Ombudsman, $4,574,000. Office of the Chief Electoral Officer, $11,150,000. Office of the Ethics Commissioner, $1,021,000. Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner, $8,714,000. Office of the Child and Youth Advocate, $16,545,000. Office of the Public Interest Commissioner, $1,444,000. Government main estimates. Advanced education expense $2,749,475,000. Capital investment $50,000. Financial transactions $1,240,200,000. Affordability and utilities expense $41,286,000. Capital investment $25,000. Financial transactions $96,970,000. Agriculture and irrigation expense $779,230,000. Capital investment $5,189,000. Arts, culture, and status of women. Expense, $253,197,000. Capital investment, $2,331,000. Financial transactions, $2,325,000. Children and Family Services expense, $1,149,670,000. Capital investment, $2,597,000. Education expense, $5,757,668,000. Capital investment, $565,000. Financial transactions, $22,179,000. Energy and Minerals expense, $622,438,000. Capital investment, $1,478,000. Environment and Protected Areas expense, $559,211,000. Capital investment, $65,550,000. Financial transactions, $100,000. Executive Council expense, $56,255,000. Capital investment, $25,000. Forestry and Parks expense, $364,842,000. Capital investment, $128,145,000. Financial transactions, $21,310,000. Health expense, $25,672,555,000. Capital investment, $29,815,000. Financial transactions, $159,196,000. Immigration and Multiculturalism expense, $41,823,000. Capital investment, $25,000. Indigenous Relations expense, $215,063,000. Capital investment, $25,000. Infrastructure expense, $495,444,000. Capital investment, $1,849,050,000. Financial transactions, $19,652,000. Jobs, Economy and Trade expense, $1,763,502,000. Capital investment, $14,653,000. Justice expense, $674,152,000. Capital investment, $14,119,000. Mental Health and Addiction expense, $1,554,712,000. Capital investment, $5,025,000. Municipal Affairs expense, $1,267,242,000. Capital investment, $550,000. Public Safety and Emergency Services expense, $1,179,216,000. Capital investment, $12,275,000. Financial transactions, $51,440,000. Seniors and Community Social Services expense, $5,316,342,000. Capital investment, $4,072,000. Financial transactions, $19,700,000. Service Alberta Red Tape Reduction expense, $211,573,000. Capital investment, $64,447,000. Financial transactions, $5,500,000. Technology and Innovation expense, $865,916,000. Capital investment, $115,649,000. Tourism and Sport expense, $135,916,000. Capital investment, $25,000. Transportation Economic Corridors expense, $1,910,459,000. Capital investment, $1,351,142. Financial transactions, $155,139,000. Treasury Board and Finance expense, $199,594,000. Capital investment, $75,000. Contingency, $2 billion. Mr. Speaker, that concludes my report.
If politics doesn't work out for the chair of committee, she's going to become an auctioneer. Perhaps she might, for the interest of clarity on the record, provide the Office of the Public Interest Commissioner estimate amount.
Mr. Speaker, the Office of the Public Interest Commissioner is $1,440,000.
The expense for the Children and Family Services amount.
Mr. Speaker, the expense for Children and Family Services is $1,149,690,000. $1,147,670,000.
Just wait.
The capital investment for jobs, economy, and trade.
Capital investments. Mr. Speaker, the capital investment for jobs, economy, and trade is $14,650,000.
And lastly, the capital investment for transportation economic corridors.
That one large in my constituency, Mr. Speaker. Transportation and economic corridors, capital investment, $1,351,142,000.
Honourable members, does the Assembly concur in the report? If so, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. In my opinion, the ayes have it. That motion is carried and so ordered.
Introduction of bills.
The Honourable the President of Treasury Board and the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I request leave to introduce Bill 14, the Appropriation Act 2024. This being a money bill, Her Honour, the Honourable the Lieutenant Governor, having been informed of the contents of this bill, recommends the same to the Assembly. The bill requests a total of $61.5 billion from the General Revenue Fund. The bill also includes $53.8 billion for expense, $3.7 billion for capital investments, $1.8 billion for financial transactions, and $2 billion for contingencies. Additionally, the bill requests a total of $158 million for the Legislative Assembly expenses for the year, as detailed in the offices of the Legislative Assembly estimates. Thank you.
Honourable members, the President of the Treasury Board and the Minister of Finance has moved first reading of Bill 14, Appropriations Act 2024. Those in favour of the motion for first reading, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. In my opinion, the ayes have it. That motion is carried and so ordered.
Bill 14, Appropriation Act 2024 is now read a first time.
The Honourable the Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for recognizing me. It's been a wonderful week of work, and I'd like to thank all members of the Chamber for their diligent efforts on behalf of their constituents. But at this time, I move the Assembly be adjourned until 1:30 Monday, March 25th, 2024.
Honourable members, prior to adjournment this afternoon, I wonder if members might join me in providing a special thank you to the extra diligent and hours that the table and all of our LAO staff have provided with respect to supporting the committee and the Assembly during the estimates process. I'm sure members will agree they've done a phenomenal job. Leader. All those in favour of adjournment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. In my opinion, the ayes have it. The House stands adjourned until Monday at 1:30 p.m.